What was the worst thing your teacher ever said to you at school? First of all, thank you for your likes and subscriptions. Let's get started. My second grade instructor warned me that if I continued writing with my left hand, I would have to wait until I finished in the corridor. Spent the rest of the year doing workbooks in the hallway. The new CAD teacher enters the classroom on his first day of work. His name is written on the board, and it appears that you would pronounce it a man. He immediately states that it is not, and that calling him so will result in expulsion from his class. When he does roll, he comes to a French African name that appears to be pronounced as a gay slur with an F in the beginning, using that epithet as a last name without exercising better judgment. It's pronounced Fajay Assman kid has undoubtedly dealt with this issue his entire life and was not amused by the confusion. The new instructor loses it and starts shouting at a 16-year-old who won't back down. They both vanish after a while. Never again was the teacher seen in the building. First period on the first day of class. In fourth grade, I stumbled over my lines. I was expected to perform a reading at a choir concert. I told my choir teacher, and she simply walked away after saying, "Well, you should have been more responsible." Actually, not a bad thing to say, but rude anyway. My solo was therefore scheduled for the performance. After saying, "I don't know what to say because the teacher wouldn't give me the words even when I requested for them," I walked away from the microphone. A moment of astonished silence was followed by a tiny disturbance. The principal escorted me off the stage and inquired as to why I would say so. I replied honestly, because she wouldn't give me the lines, even after I told her I lost them. He simply expressed some surprise and nodded, and I continued on my way. One child named Reggie lived in a van and was a member of our first grade class. The reason the majority of us students were aware of it was because a counselor had visited the class to address the issue after being taunted about not changing his clothes. We kids were all polite to him after the counselor did a superb job of explaining to us why now was the time he needed friendship and support. When we were all chatting about our Christmas gifts at sharing time following winter break, Reggie mentioned that he had received a Super Nintendo. Although we were aware that this was probably untrue, we nonetheless agreed with him so that he wouldn't feel guilty. But the teacher completely called him out on it, adding, "You have a Nintendo in your vehicle, right? Everyone hates a liar, Reggie." It was terrible to watch the kid shrivel, and the woman's utter lack of sympathy has stayed in my mind for 25 years. I had a kindergarten classmate who was born on the day of a leap year. There was no February 29th while we were in kindergarten. Her parents decided to have a party on March 1st. The instructor informed the mother of the girl, who had arrived with cupcakes and other goodies, that since the girl didn't have a birthday that year, there wouldn't be a celebration in class. The young girl was crying, and I recall her mother picking her up and taking her away. Due to the fact that we never saw her again, I believe she must have changed schools. I can't picture doing something so cruel to a youngster. Most likely the third grade teacher calling me by the moniker I detested when I was in the second grade. My aunt calling me by the same name when she learned about it didn't help, and it was at that point I'd realized I could never trust adults. My brother's friend went to a school despite the fact that his mother had passed away the previous day. He arrived late or whatever, and the teacher playfully questioned, "Did your mother pass away?" He simply answered, "Yeah, she did," and walked away. Our instructor asked the class what we wanted to be when we grew up, when I was around 9 years old. One child stated his desire to work as a garbage man. The teacher launched into a tirade, declaring that he should strive to be better and that because professions like this were just for the lowest, most stupid members of society. Ultimately, she questioned his desire to work as a bin guy. The child, who was now in tears, responded, "Because my dad's one." All right, here it is. When I was in elementary school, I misplaced my lunch at lunch and wandered outdoors for recess, alone. Seeing my error and unsure of what to do, I walked back inside and informed the lunch lady and requested advice. Using a live microphone in the middle of the dining area, she brought me there and told everyone of my error and how doing what I did was a bad thing. She announced to everyone that I would be expelled. At that time, I started crying. She would not respond when I repeatedly asked her what expulsion meant. All I was aware of was how undesirable that was. I didn't tell my mother until much later. And no, I wasn't truly kicked out. Due to a terrible bout of chickenpox, I missed 2 weeks of school and fell behind on whatever we were doing. I was still having arithmetic problems for a month after returning to school, but I was too young and too afraid to seek for assistance. I did poorly on an exam we had. Mrs. effing Nudell then humiliated me in front of the class by bringing my third grade self there. All of the students in the room heard her say, "Buffy who will never succeed in arithmetic." When I finally started crying and had a stomach ache, I went to the nurse. She treated me horribly, and for the remainder of my time in school, I had trouble with arithmetic. I'll never forget how nasty she was to me. The worst recommendation ever, if not the worst thing ever. It was termed Informatics 2 in high school, but it covered primarily the fundamentals of graphic design and other creative digital work. I had to do a project, and I was highly inspired to do well on it. Made a green screen at home, did some advanced video editing. It was through the roof. Mr. V, the professor in charge of the topic, adored it, gave me an A+, displayed it for other student groups, and subsequently told me he would use the video presentation as an example of a well-done project for future students. A few days later, I ran into Miss M, the other professor who had taught the same subject, but not to my group. In the hallway, she informed me, "I observed your work with Professor V's class. Although it's excellent, you shouldn't have done it." "Why?" "Because you set a higher standard for everyone else. Someone who would have received an A+ may now receive a B or below." I honestly took it as it was, and for a while, it kind of messed me up. It would be nice if I could go back in time and tell her to stop. I don't set the standards for evaluation, and I'm free to do as well as I want, B. In reality, there was no curve for grading in high school. Thus, she really didn't need to act that way. She most likely believed that I had increased the bar so that Professor V would now demand more of the other students. As it was perhaps the one class I actually enjoyed that semester, I wasn't really thinking about that in preparation. In elementary school, I had a teacher who would choose the student who scored the lowest on each test, make them hold hands, perform a quick marriage ceremony on them in front of the laughing class, without kissing obviously, and then have the other students sing, "Here Comes the Bride." She would then have the two children sit side by side in the classroom for the remainder of the lesson, holding hands the entire time. Indeed, it is the answer. It really occurred to me. The mocking lasted for approximately 3 weeks, and 6 years later, out of residual embarrassment, the groom and I avoided one another's company. Correction. This occurred in the early 2000s. I didn't tell my parents. I wasn't from the U.S., and I really didn't think it that big of a concern. Children are frequently disciplined, right? Because teachers in my culture are viewed as an authoritative figure, no adult would have stood up for us, unless I was being physically hurt or something, probably. Growing up, I was a little bit of a problem child since I preferred to read, write, or create art over school tasks. It didn't help that I attended an Indian school where rote memorization is prioritized above practical knowledge in the curriculum. I thus had a rather good reputation among the teachers. Once, the head teacher filled in for the ailing moral science teacher. I was initially hesitant because I had had my share of encounters with her. Moral science was a pointless subject to begin with, but that day we were discussing imagination, so I was really excited. "Who in this group visualizes when reading?" she inquired at some point throughout the lesson, and I excitedly extended my hand. I guess this is my time to shine. Wrong. All I received in front of the class was a patronizing glance and a, "Really? You?" I was devastated for a couple of days, but I think I overcame that quite soon. Yet that stuck out in my memory as being exceptionally cruel to do without any justification. Old and ready to retire, my history of art teacher is unable to do so because no one could take his place. In any case, he is generally rigorous, yet occasionally enjoys making jokes. I occupy the front row, and one day, while he is discussing a picture, he paused mid-sentence, gave me a solid 10 seconds of attention, and then said, "My name, your lips are really red, just like strawberry. LOL. I wanted to die as everyone laughed. My classmates even made fun of him for having feelings for me. I wanted to clarify a few things. I go to high school, and I'm female. Many of the teachers used to critique my clothing, makeup, hair, and lipstick in general, yet none of them said anything particularly spooky while staring at me as if they wanted to eat me. It made me feel utterly uneasy. Update 2. I must draw attention to a few points. He was referring to the color of my lips naturally rather than my lipstick. I'm not sure why he chose me out of 20 other girls. None of the other teachers ever say anything that may be construed as impolite or disturbing. My female teachers frequently bring up makeup, so they'll say things like, "Testing out new makeup? My name?" That eyeshadow or anything similar is really nice. Usually my male teachers would comment on something that is more obvious, like their hair or t-shirts. Not one of them was unsettling. I wouldn't mind if he praised my lipstick, but he said something creepy about my natural lips. What are your future plans as a math teacher for students in grades 12? Me. My career goal is teaching. Professor. Huh? You'll never finish university if you set your sights too high. Simply get married and have a family when you're young, or take a job in childcare. You are not qualified to teach. After 15 years, the same teacher walks into the office where I'm working as a coordinator at my school. He represents a book salesperson in sales. I took his business card after recognizing him and said, I thought I recognized you. I learned year 12 math from you at X school. T says, yeah, I remember you. After asking for my name, I noticed you're working as a receptionist. You're at least enrolled in a school. Me. Actually, I'm the year level and subject coordinator here and a teacher. Mathematics coordinator, ironically. I query him. Are you no longer instructing? T. Oh no, I stopped teaching after your school because no one valued me. Youngsters filed completely unfounded charges against me, and I was dismissed as a result. They said I had intimidated them. I never abused kids, you know. M. It's actually sort of bullying to tell me that I'll never succeed as a teacher. T. Oh, you're simply a kindergarten teacher, isn't that right? My principal was listening in on the chat as she left her office at this point. Principal. Karma is actually one of our most esteemed instructors and among the most knowledgeable in her field. Without her, nothing would work here. And if this is how you interact with my staff, please refrain from visiting our school in the future. There is no such thing as Asperger's syndrome, to paraphrase. Just wanting attention. This is behavior said about me to me. Even though this happened more than 20 years ago and not everyone knew it, after 2 days of exams and brain scans, my parents provided my teachers with a detailed diagnosis and explanation of my condition. The general response from every other teacher was, so that's why he's so crazy. Yeah, this is something we can work with, but not this person. Screw you. As I was taking my A-levels, my father unexpectedly passed away. Although it was a bit of a pain that it happened over Easter break. So by the time it was time to return to school, everything had already ended, including the burial. Nevertheless, on the first day of class, I go to notify my physics teacher that I wasn't able to finish my homework over the break. Now that he has his teaching certificate, the instructor is a relatively young man who was raised in the school of teaching where it was cool to swear and act casually around children. To be told, I love the guy, and we've always gotten along, and I was seen as a slacker student who was frequently late with assignments and offered weak justifications. As a result, even though I can't hold what happened against the man, I can look back with some dark schadenfreude. I went in a few minutes before class and asked to talk to him. He nodded somewhat carelessly. I told him I hadn't been able to finish my coursework. Oh, for F's sakes, Matings-Linskys, what lame excuse are you going to feed me this time? You're never going to get a respectable mark if you keep slacking off like this, he adds as he turned to face me. Apologies, sir, but I just attended my dad's funeral. He passed away during the holiday. I've never seen a man break down so quickly in front of my eyes. He stumbled through an apology and said things like, you didn't need to tell me that. It's okay. You could have just come here and said you had trouble at home. Are you okay? Is there anything I can do to help? Do you need time off? How's your family? Have you told the head? Etc. You could see the fear of being sued, fired, or hauled over the coals flash through his eyes. I basically cajoled him into telling him I wasn't mad at him by telling him I was doing okay. Only needed an extension and appreciated the support. He had every reason to be suspicious of my lack of effort, and in any other circumstance, his response would have been perfectly reasonable. He just lacked good judgment when it came to time. I won't deny that it was entertaining to watch him wriggle, though. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you soon.